Thanks for tuning into Seven Figure Fitness Business. Today, we've got a really, really interesting topic. We're going to be discussing which animal personality type are you in business and how does that actually affect you in business? Now, this is a system that Iggy created based on what he saw that some of the people that he'd worked with were doing. And some of these personality types are very much leaning towards success, and some of them are absolutely detrimental to success. So Iggy, we're going to unpack these today, but I'd really love to know initially, what are these animal personality types?
So the animal personality types are pretty awesome. There's four that we've really kind of like identified. The first one is a dead sheep. And then we have an inquisitive tiger. We have our audacious lions, and then we have our stubborn goats.
Okay. So, and when did you actually create this system?
It was actually as a result of something that I saw AG was doing on the marketing side with Hypo. Do you remember that, AG? Like you guys were testing a way of people like self-labeling themselves with like their different symptoms.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? That actually is like, this could totally translate into business, right? And so we sat down and started kind of thinking through the different types of personalities. And for me, I did like an animal personality test, and I started to look at all the different commonalities. Like, you know what? Like a lot of entrepreneurs can kind of be summed up in four different categories. And one of them was like the audacious lion, or I was thinking of a lion as the personality type. Now I was thinking of a tiger. Like those are like two very fierce animals that are dominant, but with very different type of personalities, still dominant in their own right. And then I was thinking about like goats, which are universally known for being stubborn, which a lot of people, especially as an entrepreneur, you have to have some degree of stubbornness to you if you want to be successful. And then we have our sheeps, which are just like followers, which is like general population. We just figured, if you're going to be in the business of running your own business as an entrepreneur, and you have the mindset of being a follower and wanting to do what everyone else is doing, then you're a dead sheep. You're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I know, like I see a lot of the time when people join our program, one of the first things that they do is they go and introduce themselves in the members lounge, and you've got instructions so that people will go in and they'll say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I suffer from, being a stubborn goat, and also, this, that, and the other. And it's a really kind of fun exercise, because what I think it does is it takes something where people have to truly assess themselves, in a bit of a fun way. We add an animal to it, which, makes it a little bit more lighthearted. But it is a really cool tool, because it means that you get to call people out. If they are being a stubborn goat, you can kind of call them out on it without really being so offensive. And I think by pre-framing their time in the program, by having them label themselves, it also means that we and they become very aware at the beginning about their potential failings, and what we're going to need to be aware of in their support.
Absolutely. And it makes supporting them as a client so much more impactful, because we've essentially we're communicating in the same way, right? They've agreed to their identifying their struggles and their challenges in a way that everyone understands, right? And now if they're showing signs of those things that they've already acknowledged, how much easier it is for us to have that conversation, like, hey, like past couple of weeks, you've been a stubborn goat. It's not as offensive, because we've already agreed this is something that you struggle with. And when it's happening, we need to call you out on it so that we can help you get on the right track. And it allows that communication to be way more direct, way more impactful, and easily received by the client, right?
It's the ultimate level of self-assessment. When you actually have to really think about why you haven't had success in the past, and you're able to label yourself, it really gives you that mini transformation inside, so that, you can actually make a change.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this basically like, this is Iggy's version of the Myers-Briggs test, right? Who cares about the, all those letters, alphabet soup, where people are labeling themselves like an INTJ and all that kind of stuff, stubborn goat, it's sort of a lot easier to sort of think about. What I think we should do is really start breaking them down one by one, because I was saying to you boys just before we started recording that although I know the names, right? So I can understand in principle what they're going to be about. I really haven't actually spoken to you in detail about this. So I'm really kind of curious to find out how you break these down, and maybe some examples without naming any names of like people that have been in these categories. So the one I want to know about the most, it's definitely stubborn goat. So I was hoping you could kind of break that down in a little bit more detail and then give us an example of like people, how they usually sort of fall into this category.
Who calls himself a stubborn goat? Do we have many members calling themselves stubborn goats? I guess we do.
Yeah, we do. We've had a few call themselves a stubborn goat.
I bet you that it happens at the start, and then as the program goes on, as they're being a stubborn goat, people probably hate being called that,
Absolutely. So there's a couple of traits that we've identified, like as far as stubborn goats go. There's some positive traits, right? If you're a stubborn goat, you're typically determined, you're adamant, you're tenacious, you're pretty independent, you're not easily discouraged, and you're a hard worker, and you like to figure things out on your own, right? So you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. You can be very independent. You typically work better alone. And your attitude is by hell or high water, you're going to see the task to completion, even if it's going to kill you. And I think stubborn goats love to prove people wrong. There's a bit of an edge to them where it's like people say you can't do it, and then you want to go on and do it. So there's some positive traits to it. But then the negative side of it that really affects somebody's ability to be successful as they're going through the program is they can be unreasonable, prideful, and rebellious. Right? They don't seek help, and it takes them longer to get things done because they're sitting there trying to figure out how to do things on their own. Right? So they don't quickly ask for help. They don't quickly try to get direction. And even when they do get direction, they have a hard time following instructions because they think they can do it a better way, or they automatically think of different ways they can do what we ask them to do versus just doing exactly what we tell them to do. Right? And then on top of that, a stubborn goat can pursue a dead end without ever thinking of making a change. So if you're naturally a stubborn goat, you get stuck in your way and you're constantly trying to do something the same exact way. And it can be the definition of insanity, doing the same exact thing, trying to get a different result. All right. And a funny example is a client not too long ago where we had to have a coming to Jesus talk, is what I like to call it. The clients don't know that we're having a coming to Jesus talk, but I know when I say I want to get on a call, what type of conversation is going to be. And so this client was being a stubborn goat for a few weeks. Well, when we asked him to do something, it would almost be like, it was like the strangest thing. Sometimes it would be happening live. So it'd be like, hey, so do X, Y, and Z. These are your action steps. Now tell me what your action steps were. And he'd be like, okay, so you want me to do X, Y, and Z, but in a completely different way. I was like, no. You didn't hear me correctly. Do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, yeah, do X. No, I didn't say do this. Even as he's telling me what he's going to do, he's putting his own spin on it. I was like, no, this is what you need to do. Like, you're here because you want us to help you. Right. So I just want to help you understand, like, you're showing signs of a stubborn goat right now. Like, I need you to do it exactly the way that was communicated so that we can be on the same page, because we're trying to help you. And if you go off trying to do it completely different, we can't determine what went wrong because we don't know exactly what you did.
I'm all for people going out there and, creating their own thing and, improving on the program. But, a lot of the time this comes from a place where people actually don't even understand what we're doing. And I suppose, like, what we're doing for all of our members is we're giving them access to the systems that we use in our own businesses that work, right? These are systems that operate, $5 million plus businesses. And, for people to not follow exactly the same process that we followed, at least initially when they get started, is just crazy, because that's what we're giving people, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I can think of definitely, one really key example that we had with Hypo where, someone came in and really, wanted to change everything based on sort of a perception of things. And in a case like that, I think really what I've taken stubborn goat to mean is it's when 110% that you are right, even though you're probably wrong. And I think it's an unwillingness to be open to learning. And, we've also experienced definitely some members that come into the program and immediately, they've paid for coaching, and then it's like they're telling you how they need to be coached, which is just absurd, right? Like, part of this is that you don't know what you don't know, and you need to be open to coaching. You need to understand that, the people that are at the top of the game in the world, they still get coaching. They're still open to growing. So it's really about understanding that, everyone is fallible, their knowledge is limited, and that we have plenty of growing that we all need to do.
Yeah, and it boggles my mind sometimes, just kind of touching that point, that some people can come in, invest to get help, and then say, no, this is how I want to do it. It's like, so what are we doing here?
Yeah,
there's no point for us even being here.
We had one person who I remember joined, immediately told you guys that the way that you were marketing was wrong, and then said that the program didn't work. And I was just like, oh my gosh, dude, like, the difference between what our business was doing and theirs was just obscene. But, how can you coach someone like that? So I remember we just, in the end, we just parted ways. But, I think it's probably potentially one of the most damaging places to be, because when you are unwilling to grow, or you're unwilling to learn new things, how do you progress forward in business, in life, in anything?
Exactly. Because it's going to catch up to you, and you're going to find yourself making the same mistakes over and over again, and hitting the same plateau and wondering why you're not able to break through.
Yeah. I think as well, like, it's probably important to think about this. Like, I can think of examples where I've been a stubborn goat before, but it's not about your initial reaction to something. I think we kind of have like initial reactions to everything, but it's kind of your willingness to actually understand something and move forward. And I remember reading that book, Principles by Ray Dalio, and I loved his chapter or quote in there, which was, don't seek to be right, seek to learn the truth. And something that he said that I always have found very useful is that if you're in a conversation with some people and you know that you're right, say these other people that you find very highly intelligent and you also really respect them as people, if you're the person in one opinion and like two or three other people who are very intelligent are of another opinion, you really need to take a step back and acknowledge that you're probably wrong. And it's a hard pill to swallow, because this is coming sometimes from a very, a position where you are embedded really deep into it. Your heels are so dug deep into the sand, but sometimes you just have to think about it logically and be like, look, if these people are there and I'm here, maybe I need to just shut up and actually give this a go. So it's a very, very important thing.
It's a surprisingly like deceptive trait, right? Because for somebody who's been like a stubborn goat, they've experienced some level of success just out of sheer just tenacity, right? So it's like a really deceptive trait where you slowly start being closed off to learning and are no longer growing, and you start to find that what you've been doing, what got you to a certain level, isn't going to get you to the next level. And unless you're willing to learn and really humble yourself to coaching, you're never going to break through that initial plateau. And I know for me, I definitely have some stubborn goat tendencies, and I fully acknowledge it. And so that's why for me, I never resolve to be right. And I always try to ask you guys for input, because I know if I think I'm right and I'm so used to looking at something a certain way, I got to constantly tell myself, I don't know everything. I don't know all the situations. I don't know all the variables. There's perspectives that I may not be seeing, right? I may be so close to an image that I see a specific color or I see a specific texture, but I need help zooming out so I can see the full picture, right? And if you're a stubborn goat, you're very zoomed in on one specific detail. And unless you open your mind to coaching and getting different perspective, you're often never going to see the bigger picture and never break through that initial plateau that you hit.
Ghostin, I'm going to say this, as far as business goes, you'd be one of the least stubborn goat people I can think of. And my justification for that is I would align stubborn goatness with very much being like, guilty of sunk costs, right? So when I mean that sunk cost fallacy, in case anyone doesn't know that, it's that sort of position where you've spent so much time and or money on a certain thing that you decide that you're going to make it work come hell or high water, even if spending more time on that particular thing is a complete and utter waste of your time and opportunity. Now, one of the things I've always seen with you, G, is that you change things all the time based on what is and isn't working. So I'm really interested in your opinion on that.
Yeah, I've got a good analogy here. Like, being a former professional poker player, I think this really explains the concept. Imagine you're playing someone and, the first round of betting, pre-flop, you put in $100. The second round of betting on the flop, you put in another $100. On the turn, you put in another $100. So you've put in $400 and you're sitting there with $500 total. So you've got $100 left behind you. Your opponent puts in the last $100. Now you can't win the hand. You've been trying to, you've got all this and you're looking at your cards and you've got the worst possible combination. You've got a 2-3, but that person has bet $100. Are you going to pay that additional $100 to try and win the 900, or are you going to decide to cut your losses? Now, you can't win. It's logical, but emotionally you're thinking, I need to give this $100 so I can find out the answer.
Yeah.
Right. And people become so attached to, that hand of poker, or so attached to something that's happening in business because they've committed all this time and effort into making it happen. But logically, just save you $100.
I experience in sales calls all the time, guys. Like, I mean, the amount of people that I speak to that are halfway through a mentor program that just isn't working for them. They've spent so much time, so much opportunities gone, but because they've paid for this program, they're like, I'm going to wring this thing dry for everything I can get. But the problem is that so far there's no evidence of any results, and it doesn't matter. They're going to finish that thing out just in case, because, sunk costs. I don't want to waste what I've paid for. Really what they're wasting there is actually time and opportunity. And so in a case like that, I always just think, oh, geez, like just save yourself and come and join so we can help you start making some money. It just doesn't make any logical sense, but it's such a common thing that I see.
Yeah, I think the question there is, I had a similar situation. I had someone I spoke to about this not too long ago, and I asked them, hey, I understand that you're doing another program at the moment, but do you feel like you're stagnant? And they said, yes. So if you're stagnant, are you going to continue doing what you're doing, or are you going to make a change? And, I think this guy I spoke to couldn't quite get over the fact that he was still in another program, but it's like his answer to that was he was stagnant, but he was going to keep continuing doing what he was doing, continuing getting the results that he wasn't getting.
It is. That's why it's called the sunk cost fallacy, because logically it doesn't actually make any sense. It's an illogical argument, but because we have emotionally committed either time, resources of some type to it, we don't like to feel that that's been a waste. So we see it through to the end just so that we can waste even more of our time.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where if you're in a situation where you're not getting where you need to be, you're going to find examples of people who are where you want to be, and then figure out, okay, in a lot of cases, it may be even like your execution and how you're approaching the situation at hand. Like if you're stuck in a rut and you're trying to figure out how to get out, first you need to look at yourself and be like, all right, am I actually doing the work that I'm being asked to do? And am I getting the input? Am I getting the help? Am I putting in 100% effort? And if you're still not getting the results that you want, then you need to reevaluate and be like, maybe what I'm doing isn't necessarily the right approach. And I find this with a lot of clients who are attached to like a specific brand that they've set up, right? And they start running some marketing, start running some ads, and they're not getting the numbers that they need. Yeah. And instead of being willing to make the necessary changes, they're going to try and put more money in, hoping that the results are going to change. And oftentimes it doesn't change.
Yeah, that's actually quite common as well. Like, you'd experience that a lot. I do in sales calls, people that are like, I want to hit this brand. And it's like, okay, cool. Just to clarify, if that brand doesn't land, would you be open to changing those so we can find something that works? No, it's this or nothing. I mean, how do you help someone like that?
Well, I mean, like, you can still definitely help them. It's just that it's going to be not as profitable as another venture, right? So, if you're working with men or women over 55, no one really wants to work with them for some reason, which baffles me because it doesn't make sense. They have the most money and they pay out their programs and they're generally great clients and you help them change their lives. But for some reason, people don't want to work with them. Yet, if you're working like the most competitive market you can go into overall is generally young people under the age of, say, 25 who are in bodybuilding and, want to get into sport, coaching, all that sort of stuff. And they're the hardest market because everyone wants to train them. So there's so much competition and they don't have much money.
Yeah.
So, like depending on what you want to do, if you want to impact those people, cool, but you're not going to have as profitable business most likely as if you were to focus on people who actually have money.
Yeah, it's another big point that I see and hear all the time, even on the front end, just on a sales call. But I'm thinking, like, just based on time, we want to move along the list. So what is this one? I don't know what it's going to be at all. What is a dead sheep, Iggy?
So a dead sheep is actually one of my favorite ones to call people out on because it's like the personality trait of somebody who's very like amiable. So they're very people pleasing. They're very content. They're humble. They're soft, non-confrontational people, and have a really strong desire to please people, make everyone that's around them feel comfortable, right? So they avoid conflict. They submit in order to keep the peace, and oftentimes play it very safe, but tend to be very consistent in their personalities. So the challenge with the dead sheep is, man, business is a dog eat dog world, right? It can be vicious, it can be ruthless, and you got to be willing to go against the grain if you want to be successful. Not in like an unethical way or an immoral way, but you got to be willing to be bold, and you got to be willing to be decisive, and you got to be willing to make tough decisions. And so if somebody's a dead sheep, they're oftentimes fearful. They count themselves out. They get easily discouraged by what people say, and they don't take any action when they get overwhelmed. So when they get overwhelmed, have you ever seen a sheep get scared? Right? When a sheep gets scared, they fall over and just kind of like are frozen. So to get stiff and don't do anything is like the equivalent of burying their head in the sand, hoping the problem goes away, but the problem never goes away. So, and then they'll put things off, waiting for the timing to be perfect, right?
Okay.
When everything kind of works out and the alignment is the stars are perfectly aligned, then they're going to do it. But also, oftentimes that's just a way that they're masking the fact that they're just afraid of failure. They're terribly afraid of rejection.
I can relate to this one a lot, especially before we started our online business. Definitely I was terrified about launching the business because I didn't want people to say bad things about what we were doing. This is about 4 or 5 years ago now. But definitely perfectionism is that sort of thing of like not wanting to launch and take imperfect action, but wanting everything to be perfect. And I hear it all the time. And I just know that it is so damaging to time, because these people, they never launch. They never take action because it's never quite right. And the thing about it is that it doesn't ever end up being the right time. There's always something else that you need to read, learn, fix, update, improve. So you end up getting nowhere.
Absolutely. And this is one of the most dangerous ones, because people who have a natural tendency to be a dead sheep will invest into coaching and do absolutely nothing with it.
Yeah.
And then what that does is perpetuate this narrative that they've developed in their mind. Like they're just not going to be successful at it.
I was going to say, just the sad irony about these people as well is I think a lot of the people that they look up to in business who are so successful, they are not dead sheeps. They launched programs. They made them amazing because they got it started. They grew, they launched, they improved. Whereas the dead sheep, they fix and they never launch. And so they're looking up to people and trying to match those people, but they never even get in the game.
Exactly. They're stuck on the sideline saying, tomorrow I'm gonna do it. Right. I just got to make sure everything's like perfect. I'm going to do it tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes.
Yeah.
And people who are typically kind of like a dead sheep are oftentimes really, really slow starters in the program.
Yeah.
Really slow starters. And that's because they have a hard time overcoming their fear of failure and rejection. Right. They have a hard time making the tough decisions to kind of just put themselves out there and put a product out there and put a service out there that's not perfect, right? And people aren't looking for perfection in the marketplace. They're looking for results. So if you can get them results via imperfect means, and you're dedicated to making improvements and becoming the best version, creating the best possible program out there, you're still going to get somewhere. But if you're like focused on trying to create the best possible product before you even put it out there, you're never going to get anywhere.
Would you say that that dead sheep are the type of people that all their pens have run dry and their paper bins are full from all the to-do lists that they've made that really didn't matter at all?
Yeah, dead sheep tend to be busy bees. So they tend to be busy doing a lot of things that have no impact on the needle in their business, right? They're the ones that are going to be focusing on the specific font on the page and focusing on, the color schemes and focusing on like all these different things that really don't matter at the end of the day. It's just like, get it out there. And then they're also the ones that if they're struggling, have a really hard time asking for help because they don't want to cause any inconvenience. Right. So those are typically like the ones that we have to chase down oftentimes, because we know if we don't hear from them, they're either overwhelmed or curled up somewhere in a corner, just with their hands up, waiting for somebody to pull them out of the water. And I just really think about like the sheeps when they get scared, they fall over and they have to wait for the shepherd to go and pick them up and get them back on their feet.
Well, Iggy, why don't you share with everybody what the systems are that we actually use to help people stay on track in the program?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that we do is we have a business report that our clients need to fill out, just kind of give us an update every week, where their business is at, what their numbers look like, where in the process that they're in. And then we have like a regular check-in, kind of like a check-in cadence, where on Mondays we'll send out business report feedbacks. We'll send out check-ins and get people to determine what their leverage task is for the week. And then we have like Wednesday follow-ups where we'll just kind of follow up on those leverage tasks that clients need to be doing. And then Fridays, we figure out, okay, how did we do on those leverage tasks that we determined that we're going to do? Where are we at in the process? So there's a few touch points that we have to make sure people are actually getting to where they need to be as far as like the support goes and the accountability side goes. And then as far as the program goes, we try to lay things out like, hey, focus on a few action steps. Once you're done with these action steps, then we'll give you the next set of action steps based on your situation and where you're at and how you need to get to where you need to be.
I think the first step to overcoming being a dead sheep is the acknowledgement that you are a dead sheep, right? It's understanding and knowing that, hey, this is the behavior pattern that I've followed in the past, and this is actually what I need to change to become an audacious lion, or to become an inquisitive tiger, or to become, someone who is having more success.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think of awareness for anything. Awareness is always the first step to change. You've got to be aware and willing to admit where you are now so that you actually have weaknesses that need to be worked on.
Yeah. And then you got to be willing to take action despite how you feel about the action that you're taking, right? You can't wait for everything to feel perfect or for everything to feel right. You just gotta, especially if you're a dead sheep, you just gotta, you have to take the first step. You gotta implement, even if you're not satisfied with what you're implementing. You just need to implement, because that's going to create momentum, and that momentum is going to create progress. Even if it blows up, okay, this didn't work. Okay, let me implement the next thing. Even if it blows up, you're one step closer to finding and doing something that's going to work out in the way that you need it to work out.
Yeah. So the dead sheep's the type of person who they want to make a 6-month program. Rather than launching it after making the first couple of weeks, they complete the entire 6 months and then find out that nobody wants it, right? Or they keep perfecting it till the end when, they never launch.
Yep.
Okay. So we've got a pretty good read on stubborn goat and dead sheep. What is the inquisitive tiger all about?
The inquisitive tiger is actually really awesome, because if somebody is an inquisitive tiger, they're pretty analytical. They're often like logical and like their thinking, want to see the bigger picture and everything. They're the type of people that want to know the why, right? They're like the type of kids that's like constantly asking why. Like, why are you doing that? And then you give them the answer, like, why? And then you give them the answer and they're like, why? They want to know all the details and have a full understanding of the picture, even though that's not necessarily the best thing for them, right? They're not even afraid to take risks, but they need to make sure that it's calculated, right? They need to make sure that it makes sense, and they need to analyze like the risk that they're taking, and it has to make sense. And they're typically skeptical and not easily trusting. They can also be very independent and work very well alone. But the most important thing is they got to understand why before following instructions, and really oftentimes prefer to work behind the scenes. So those are like some of the positive traits. And then like the negative side of it is they're perfectionists and can be overthinkers because they're constantly analyzing things that they can get paralysis by analysis, where they're just constantly thinking about the different scenarios and thinking about how this can be implemented and what the best course of action would be. And that's where the difference between them and the dead sheep is like they're not afraid to take action, but they'll sit there thinking about all the different variables before they take the action, and oftentimes end up making no progress whatsoever. And then I find a lot of inquisitive tigers often comparing themselves to others and get easily hung up on little details that really aren't relevant. And then oftentimes play it too safe and miss out on some really great opportunities. So those are like the main things as far as like the inquisitive tigers go. And we get a lot of inquisitive tigers in the program. And they oftentimes do really, really well. We have some examples of inquisitive tigers that are absolutely crushing it.
Yeah. So do either of you relate in any way to this one?
I have learned to be an inquisitive tiger, but I'm much more naturally like an audacious lion.
Yeah, I think I sit in the same sort of category. Like, like I even think my personality when it comes to investing, when it comes into shares or Bitcoin, I don't need to know why. I just need to know who the best person is in the world in it, and then I just copy them, right? So I think I probably don't relate to it so much.
You guys definitely just lions for sure.
I feel like inquisitive tigers are like pretty hard to sell. They need a lot of details up front. Whereas like audacious lions are like the easiest people to sell on the planet. I'm like the easiest sell to make.
You and I joke about this all the time, but the amount of money that we drop on coaching programs, one sales call, one close, done.
Oh my goodness. Like if it makes sense, well, I'm like, how much is it? 12K? All right, cool. Let's go.
I've been impacted by this as well, though, because I when it comes to buying these days, I'm exactly the same. I see the value in something. I don't think, 12K. I just think, well, yeah, that's a sale, right? That's fine. Like it's not a problem. So when it comes down to making those decisions, I think it's really just about being able to quickly analyze, in a logical way rather than an emotional way about the benefits versus the cost, right? Sometimes they won't be there, but most of the time when you look at it closely, it very much can be.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that being a tiger, do you think that they come from a place of being anxious, uncertainty, thinking too much about the future?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it because inquisitive tigers want to see like the bigger picture and they want to see, and for them to feel comfortable moving forward, they have to see how everything kind of fits in this big picture puzzle. What if I do this, how does this fit into the overall scheme of what we're trying to accomplish? And oftentimes you don't know how it's necessarily going to fit. And sometimes that can make it difficult for them to take that first step because there's a lot of uncertainties and they want to see a lot of details. They want to be able to see like, it's like the math student who wants to get the answer first and then figure out like how you got to that answer. Right. So get the answer first and then figure out, okay, how do I prove that answer? Right. But oftentimes you just got to be willing to take the first step and then kind of figure it out as you go. And inquisitive tigers have a really hard time doing that because they have to know the why and they have to understand the picture. And unless they're able to put their desire to know the why or understand all the details on the back burner, they can get stuck in paralysis analysis.
So it sounds to me like inquisitive tigers could be very, very good in like an administrative or a management role because they're actually really good at finding problems. They're maybe not the person who's the visionary to drive the business forward. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, I could see that there could be certain drawbacks in it. But also, depending on that person, if they're in a job role, sometimes it could be very suitable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, inquisitive tigers make really, really great clients because they're able to they'll ask questions and ask things in a way that you don't necessarily, I didn't even think of. And I'm like, you know what? I need to create a training on that because this is a great question. I didn't even think of answering that. So we get a lot of improvements in the program from the inquisitive tigers that we work with that ask different types of questions that are like, oh, okay, I didn't think to even address that in this training. I'm going to create a new training that addresses that. And they oftentimes make it a lot easier to create the program in such a way where it's like all the different possible scenarios are accommodated for. So I think they can make great COOs or even like operational type managers and like people who work behind the scenes to make sure the business is moving towards the big picture that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's another, like, it's a fairly positive personality type. Let's go to the last animal personality type, which is the audacious lion.
The audacious lion is very much somebody who has a similar type of attitude as me. Audacious lions are very bold. They're decisive, lively, and fearless. If anything, they're not afraid to take risk, and they make decisions based on intuition. All right. If you feel good about something, you're going to do it. Like if I feel generally pretty good about, if I'm on a call with somebody and they tell me kind of like the overview of what I'm going to get, and I feel pretty good about it, I'm willing to just put my money on it. Right. And the cool thing about audacious lions, they can be very good team players, visionaries, and they're not afraid to speak their mind. So if you ask somebody who's generally like an audacious lion for their opinion, they're going to give you their opinion and a half, simply because we're full of a lot of them. And then the dark side of it is we can be very reckless. Audacious lions can be reckless, defiant, and rash. They can often act without thinking and make things worse for themselves. And one of the dangerous things about being audacious lion is when you make up your mind, you can lose sight of reality or reason. Like if you're very convinced about something, it's very easy to lose sight of some reason. And you need friends that can tell you like, hey, like, bro, like this isn't working out the way that we wanted it to. And like, oh yeah, you're right. Right. But it's very easy to lose sight. And it can be very addictive personalities. So if they like something, they really like it. And then sometimes you can be very inconsistent, very inconsistent and not see things all the way through. So if you're audacious lion, you tend to start a ton of different things, kind of start them, get halfway and be like, shit, like this isn't the right thing. And then quickly switch direction, start another thing, like, oh, snap. And then start all these different things and not really get anywhere.
This is something that I can definitely relate to, like the good and the bad of an audacious lion. I think that, as a typical entrepreneur, like, I have a lot of those characteristics and, but it also does come with the negative side of it. I think AP, you can say that, I do make decisions and change things very, very fast. I leave a trail of destruction behind me that I have our staff clean up. And, one of the best things that's happened for me is like having people like you, AP and Iggy, to kind of balance me out when I go on one of those rampages and decide that I'm going to start changing everything. And, I think that the other big thing about, it's great having business partners and help and confidants that you can talk to is also just knowing your numbers. And I think that when you actually have logically down on paper, exactly the numbers, how things work, and you're able to strip that away and take it away from an emotional aspect where you're like, I'm going to make this decision because this and this. That's what makes the audacious really powerful, because they have everything's data driven and they understand the implications of the decisions that they're making.
Yeah. If you're an audacious lion, you have to make data driven decisions, even though you can make good decisions intuitively. You can't rely on your intuition all the time. You've got to look at the facts. You got to look at the numbers and really take a step back and put on like your Inquisitive Tiger hat and analyze and make sure you're making a logical decision that's data driven. And if you can mix those two things together, I mean, now you have the recipes to be extremely impactful and have a ton of success in pretty much whatever you do.
What I'm picking up from today is that ultimately all of these different categories, they have some positives and some negatives. Some of them obviously a lot more positives than negatives, and the others vice versa. But, both of you guys, I can definitely see so much of the audacious lion in. And what I will say about that is the way that I've seen that you guys manage the weaknesses of that particular type is that, you're both very good at communication, and you're both very self-reflective, which means that you're far more likely to actually catch yourself when you're going down in a logical or overly committed position. And I think that's really the lesson, is that, people need to, first of all, become aware of which animal personality type they are. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? And then once they uncover those weaknesses, they need to be very aware about the way to manage those. Because these personality types, they do sound like things that people are somewhat embedded to. It's kind of a part of your makeup. Yes, you can make some changes, but most important is just to be aware of having people around you and also yourself so that you can really analyze and make decisions to double down on your strengths and to manage the weaknesses. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the sooner you become aware of kind of what your tendencies are, the better of an experience you're going to get out of any kind of mentorship program. Right. It's so much easier for us to help clients when we know what they're struggling with and what their tendencies are, because now we're on the same page and we can call them out and get them the help that they need and provide the support that they need, or even adjust our approach with them because we know where they're at. And we're able to meet them and take them from where they're at to where they want to be and guide them along the way.
Awesome. Look, I think it's been a really great episode filled with a lot of value. I really hope that anyone listening in actually takes the time to think about what personality type or types they most resonate with and have a think about what can be the strengths and weaknesses in those, particularly your weaknesses, and maybe ask a friend or family member or a mentor even better about what they think you are. And sort of that would be a really good way to sort of take some value away from this episode. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to add before we finish up?
I just wanted to point out that there's an Audacious lion up on the wall behind Iggy just there.
Yes, this is my spirit animal. I got to remind people that I'm kind and not nice. Like the lion is my spirit animal for a reason. I'm not afraid to go for your throat.
If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, every time you speak to Iggy on video, he's kind of wearing like a blondie red wig, which is the lion's mane, which kind of shoots out from his head, and his head sort of sits directly in the middle. So he's very, very much an audacious lion.
I am, all right, guys. True and true.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.